My name is Marcus. I am 67 years old, a retired salesman, and I live here in Chicago, Illinois. What I am going to tell you today is about the day 35 years of marriage crumbled in a matter of seconds when I came home early, wanting to surprise my wife, and found a scene I will never forget. If you have already gone through the pain of betrayal, or know someone who suffered through this, leave a like to cheer up this old heart. Subscribe to the channel, Bradley's Stories, so you don't miss my next life stories. And tell me in the comments where you are watching this video from, and what time it is there right now. Have you ever lived through something that destroyed your trust in someone you loved? It brings me great joy to know which corner of the States and at what moment of the day you are listening to me. I was born down in Birmingham, Alabama, a city where the smell of barbecue fills the streets and biscuits are made by hand early in the morning. My father was a merchant, a man of few words and a lot of honor. He always said that a man's word was worth more than any signed paper. I grew up watching my father leave before the sun came up and return when the moon was already high. But never, in all those years, did I see my mother distrust him. They had that old school trust, you know? That certainty that the other person was there, solid, no matter what happened. I was the youngest of 5 children. 3 boys and 2 girls. We didn't have much, but we had enough. My mother made Sunday dinners that filled the house with a savory smell, and after church, we would all gather at the table to eat. Pot roast, mac and cheese, collard greens seasoned just right. Man, those were the good old days. We played in the street until it got dark. We flew kites, played stickball or basketball with a worn-out ball. I was skinny as a rail, but I ran like a young colt. When I started working as just a young kid, I was a helper at a hardware store in downtown Birmingham. The owner, Mr. Henderson, was a fair man who taught me the value of honest work. I carried bantas, organized nails, screws, tools. I earned very little, but those few dollars I brought home at the end of the month made my mother proud. She kept them in a cookie tin and said she was saving it for when I needed it. I never needed it. In the end, she used it to buy a new dress so my oldest sister could get married. It was at a church picnic that I met Eleanor. She had brown eyes that shone with the light of the sparklers, and she wore a colorful skirt that moved when she danced. I stood there like a fool, just watching. My older brother gave me a shove and told me to go talk to her, that a pretty woman doesn't wait for a timid man. I gathered my courage, crossed the churchyard, and asked her for a dance. She smiled, took my hand, and at that moment, my dear friend, I felt I had found the person I was going to spend the rest of my life with. We courted for a few years. I would walk up to her house, which sat on a hill, every afternoon. We would sit on the porch, drink sweet tea, and talk about everything. She told me about her dreams, of having her own house, of having children, of growing old with me. I promised her I would work hard to give her all of that, and I promised it from the heart, believing that it was forever. Eleanor was sweet and affectionate. She made me laugh. My family adored her, and her family welcomed me with open arms. We got married on a summer afternoon in the same church where we met. My mother cried through the whole ceremony, and my father, even being a stern man, squeezed my hand tight and said he was proud. Eleanor looked beautiful in that simple dress, but it looked like it had been made just for her. We didn't have money for a honeymoon, so we spent the weekend at a simple hotel near Birmingham. But I was happy. My God, was I happy. I thought I had everything a man could want. Shortly after we married, we moved to Chicago, where I got a better job as a salesman at an appliance store. The city was bigger, it had more opportunities. We rented a small apartment, but it was ours. Eleanor got a job in a textile factory sewing clothes. We worked hard, saved every dollar. The first few years were tough, but we were together, and that was enough. Little by little, we saved up money and bought our own home, a simple 2-story house with 3 bedrooms in a quiet neighborhood. It was the happiest day of our lives when we received the keys. We had 2 children. The oldest, Raymond, looked like me, quiet and hardworking. Judy, the youngest, was just like her mother, chatty and full of energy. I worked a lot, left early, and came back late. But whenever I could, I took the kids fishing at the lake or to the park to fly kites. Eleanor took care of the house, the kids, me. She made that pot roast I loved so much. And on cold winter nights, we would bundle up under the quilts, listening to the wind hit the window. I believed we had built something solid, something that nothing could knock down. But life, my friend, has a way of teaching us that nothing is guaranteed forever. The years went by, and life continued in that same rhythm. I kept working as a salesman, now in a larger furniture and appliance store in downtown Chicago. It was a job that demanded dedication, you know? I had to always be available for customers, make visits, close sales, and many times I left the house before 8 in the morning and only returned after 7 at night. On Saturdays, I worked until noon. But I didn't complain, because every commission I earned was to improve our life, to give comfort to Eleanor and the kids. Eleanor stayed at the factory for some time, but when the children grew a bit, she stopped working outside. She said she wanted to take better care of the house, to be present when the kids came home from school. It seemed perfect to me because the hustle of the daily grind was getting heavy for her, and I earned enough to support the family. The house was always tidy, the food ready at the right time, the clothes washed and ironed. Eleanor was a good housewife. I never doubted that. Raymond grew up and became a responsible young man. He studied engineering, got a good job in Atlanta, and moved down there. Judy followed another path. She married young to a boy right here from Chicago. She gave us 2 precious grandbabies. Life kept going. The years kept passing, and Eleanor and I were left alone in that big house. The children had their lives. They came to visit us now and then, but the routine was just the 2 of us. It was around that time that the first signs started to appear, but blind as I was, I didn't see anything. Eleanor started dressing up more, wearing different clothes, dyeing her hair more frequently. I found it beautiful. I thought she was taking care of herself, feeling good about herself. She also started going out more. She said she was going to friends' houses, that she was going for walks in the park, that she had started going to a crafts group at the church. I encouraged her. I said it was good that she had her activities, that she shouldn't just stay home waiting for me to arrive. Our neighbor Byron had moved into the house next door about 3 years prior. He was a young guy, single, worked with computers or something. Those modern things I didn't understand very well. He was polite, always greeted us, offered help when we needed to carry something heavy. I actually liked him. He seemed like a good neighbor. Sometimes we chatted at the gate. He asked how work was going. I asked how his things were. A nice guy. I never imagined that Eleanor and Byron started chatting more too. She told me that he had asked for help with some things around the house. that he didn't know how to cook well, that she had given him some tips. It seemed natural to me, just neighborly stuff, good coexistence. Several times I came home and she mentioned she had taken a plate of food to Byron because the poor guy lived on frozen dinners. I even joked about it. I said she was too good, that she took care of everybody. It never crossed my mind that it could be anything else. There was a time when Eleanor started getting more irritated with me. She complained that I worked too much, that I was never home, that we didn't talk like before. I tried to explain to her that I needed to work, that the bills didn't pay themselves, that I was doing it for us. But she insisted. She said I was already old, that I could slow down, that we had enough. I didn't understand where that restlessness of hers came from, that sudden dissatisfaction with the life we had built together. I started to notice, too, that she was more distant in bed. Before, we still had those moments of affection, of intimacy, even after so many years together. But it started cooling off. You know? She always had an excuse, a headache, tiredness, some discomfort. I respected it. I didn't insist. I thought it was age catching up to both of us, that it was natural. But deep down it bothered me, left me with a strange sensation in my chest, as if something was wrong, but I couldn't identify what. One day I came home earlier because I had closed a big sale and my boss let me go. It was mid-afternoon, a rare thing to happen. When I entered, the house was silent. I called out for Eleanor, but she didn't answer. I went up the stairs, went to the bedroom, and she was there looking at her phone, startled by my arrival. I asked her if everything was okay, and she said yes, that she was just distracted. But I noticed she hid the phone very quickly, as if she didn't want me to see what she was doing. That left me with a doubt, but I didn't say anything. I thought I was being paranoid, suspicious without reason. The weeks went by and that unease only increased inside me. I tried to talk to Eleanor, asked her if everything was okay, if she was happy, if she needed anything. She always said yes, that everything was perfect, that I was imagining things, but her eyes didn't say the same. There was something different about her, an agitation, an anxiety I couldn't understand, and that bad feeling wouldn't leave me alone, except I was used to trusting, raised on those old values that marriage was forever. And I didn't want to believe that what was crossing my mind could be true. Months passed, and that bad feeling only grew inside me. I tried to ignore it, convince myself I was imagining things, that it was all in my head. But there was something in the air, a tension I couldn't explain. Eleanor was increasingly distant, more irritated with any little thing. If I arrived and commented that dinner was good, she rolled her eyes. If I suggested we watch a movie together, she said she was tired. If I tried to talk, she answered with one-word answers, as if conversing with me was a sacrifice. I started to notice she was different physically, too. She had lost weight, was wearing more makeup, using perfumes I had never smelled before. One day I came home, and her hair was dyed a lighter shade. She was all dressed up, wearing a new blouse I didn't recognize. I asked her if she had bought new clothes, and she told me she had found it on sale. I complimented her. I told her she looked beautiful, but she barely looked at me, just murmured a dry thanks, and went to the kitchen. That hurt, you know. It hurt because I realized she wasn't dressing up for me. She was dressing up for something else, or worse, for someone else. Byron, our neighbor, seemed to be increasingly present in our lives. He started showing up more frequently, always with some excuse that he needed a cup of sugar, that his internet was down and he wanted to know if ours was working, that he had made too much coffee and was bringing us some. I found all of that normal, just good neighborliness. I even liked it, because living near polite people is good. But Eleanor got too excited when he appeared. Her eyes shone in a way they didn't shine when she looked at me anymore. There was one afternoon I arrived from work and found the two of them talking at the gate. They were laughing, standing very close to each other. When they saw me, they separated quickly, and Byron invented some random excuse. He said he was leaving. Eleanor went into the house ahead of me, and I felt a huge heaviness in my chest. I asked her what they were talking about, and she said it was nonsense, that Byron had told a joke, but she didn't tell me what the joke was, and that kept spinning in my head all night. I started paying more attention. I noticed that when I left for work in the morning, many times Byron was also leaving, but he worked from home. So why was he leaving at the same time as me? And when I returned earlier, occasionally, I saw him arriving home shortly after me, as if he had left somewhere in a hurry. That made no sense, or it made all the sense in the world, but I didn't want to see it. One night, Eleanor was taking a shower, and her cell phone rang on the kitchen table. I looked out of the corner of my eye and saw the name Byron on the screen. My heart raced. I stood there, watching the phone ring, 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 until it stopped. I thought about picking it up, about checking the messages, but something stopped me. It was fear. Fear of confirming what I already suspected in the depths of my soul. When Eleanor came out of the bathroom, I asked her if the phone had rung, and she said no, that she hadn't heard anything. A lie. I was sure it was a lie. After that day, I started noticing more things. Eleanor started going out more frequently, always with ready-made excuses. That she was going to the market, that she was going to a friend's house, that she was going to walk in the park, and every time she went out, she took hours to return. I would call her cell phone, and she took a long time to answer or didn't answer at all, and later sent a message saying she was busy. Busy doing what? I didn't ask because I was afraid of the answer. I was afraid of exploding, of making a scene, of destroying everything without being sure. But the straw that broke the camel's back was when I found a note in her drawer. I wasn't looking for anything. I swear to God, I was putting away clean clothes in the closet when I saw a piece of folded paper between her blouses. I took it without thinking, opened it, and read. They were just a few handwritten words. Today was special. Thanks for everything. B. The handwriting was a man's, firm, slanted. The B could only be Byron. My hands shook, my vision blurred. I sat on the edge of the bed with that paper in my hand and felt a pain so great in my chest I thought I was going to have a heart attack right there. I didn't confront Eleanor in that moment. I couldn't. I put the note back where it was, arranged the clothes, and left the room. I went to the living room, sat in the armchair, turned on the television, but I wasn't watching anything. I only heard the blood hammering in my ears. I only felt that lump in my throat, that urge to cry and scream at the same time. I thought about everything we had built together. I thought about the years of hard work, about the promises we made to each other, about the children we raised, about the happy moments we lived. And all of that was being destroyed because of a neighbor, a man who could be her son. Eleanor entered the living room and asked if I wanted dinner. I told her I wasn't hungry. She insisted. She said she had made something tasty, but I refused again. She stood there looking at me, and I could feel the weight of guilt in her gaze. But she said nothing, just shrugged and went to the kitchen. I stayed there alone, thinking about what to do. Should I confront her? Should I go find Byron and punch him in the face? Should I pretend I didn't know anything and keep living that lie? That was when I had an idea. I needed to be sure. I needed to see with my own eyes what was happening. I couldn't keep living in that agony, in that doubt that was consuming me from the inside. So I planned something. In the coming weeks, I was going to create an opportunity to catch the two of them together. I was going to pretend I was going to travel for work or go out to handle something. But in reality, I was going to stay watching, and I was going to discover the truth once and for all. Because 35 years of marriage couldn't end like this, based on suspicion and hidden notes. I needed concrete proof, and when I had that proof, then I would make a decision. I spent the following days planning everything down to the smallest detail. I couldn't fail. I couldn't let slip any clue that I was suspicious. I kept acting normal at home, chatting with Eleanor as if nothing was happening, leaving for work at the same time as always, returning at the same time as always. But inside I was boiling. The rage, the sadness, the anxiety, all mixed in a whirlwind that wouldn't let me sleep well. On Thursday night during dinner, I dropped the bait. I commented casually that an opportunity had come up to close a big deal in Detroit and that I would need to travel early Friday morning. Eleanor lifted her eyes from her plate, and I swear I saw a different shine in that look. "How many days will you be gone?" she asked, trying to seem uninterested, but I noticed the anxiety in her voice. "I'll be back Saturday night," I replied, observing her every reaction. "Oh, okay," she said, and went back to eating. But I saw the corner of her mouth curve into a half smile she tried to hide. At that moment, my stomach turned. On Friday morning, I packed my small suitcase, the same one I always took on short trips. I put in some clothes, my toiletries bag. I pretended I was really getting ready. Eleanor was in the kitchen making coffee, too calm for someone whose life was about to crumble. I came down with the suitcase, drank the coffee quickly, gave her a cold kiss, and left. I got in the car, started it, waved, and drove off. But I didn't go to Detroit. I went around the block, parked the car 3 streets away from the house, in a place where no one would notice, and walked back, entering through the back of a vacant lot near our street. I stayed hidden there, crouched behind some old bushes, with my heart beating so strong I thought the whole world was going to hear it. From there, I had a perfect view of Byron's house and the entrance to my own house. I waited 15 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes, nothing. I started to think I had gone crazy, that I was doing something insane, hiding like a bandit near my own home. But then I saw my front door open. It was Eleanor. She looked to the sides, like someone checking to see if anyone is watching. She crossed the driveway and went straight to Byron's house. My blood ran cold. My legs shook so much I almost fell. I saw her ring the doorbell. The door opened. Byron appeared, smiled at her, and she went inside. The door closed behind the two of them. I stood there paralyzed, unable to move, unable to think straight. How long was I in that position? I don't know. It could have been 5 minutes or 5 hours. I could only stare at that closed door, imagining what was happening in there, feeling a pain so deep I don't even know how to describe it. But I still didn't have enough proof. So I waited a little longer, gathered my strength, snuck out of there, and went to a coffee shop downtown. I drank coffee, tried to calm down, looked at the time on my watch. It was almost noon. I decided to go back home. I was going to spring the surprise I had planned. I was going to arrive suddenly, without warning, and I was going to see with my own eyes what was happening. I returned home mid-afternoon, around 3 o'clock. I parked the car in the driveway very slowly, without making noise. I took the keys, opened the front door with total care. I entered the living room in silence. The house was quiet, too quiet. I started up the stairs, and that was when I heard moans, loud moans coming from my bedroom. My bedroom, our bed, the place where Eleanor and I had slept together for 35 years. I ran up the rest of the stairs, my heart exploding in my chest. I reached the hallway, and the moans were even louder. They were hers. I recognized that voice, but I had never heard her moan that way with me. Never. I went to the bedroom door and tried to open it. It was locked from the inside. In my own house, the door to my own bedroom was locked, and my wife was in there with another man. I pounded on the door with force, hitting the wood. "Eleanor, open this door!" I screamed, my voice coming out hoarse from so much rage. The moans stopped immediately. Total silence. Then I heard her agitated voice trembling. "Calm down, Marcus. Wait. I'm finishing tidying the room. She thought I was an idiot, that I didn't know what was happening in there. "Open this door now, Eleanor!" I screamed again, pounding harder. But she didn't open it. Just kept saying to wait, to be calm, inventing ridiculous excuses. That was when I lost control. I took a step back and threw myself against the door with all the strength I had. The old wood creaked, but didn't give. I hit it again with my shoulder. And again. On the fourth try, the door burst open with a crash, the latch flying to one side. Pieces of wood scattered on the floor. And there was the scene I will never forget, as long as I live. The bed all messed up. Sheets thrown on the floor, pillows scattered. Eleanor was in a robe, her hair messy, her face red and sweating. She was standing in the middle of the room, looking at me with eyes wide open, mouth open, trying to say something, but unable to. "I told you I was tidying up," she screamed desperately. "You ruined the surprise." "Surprise? What surprise?" I looked around, searching. There was no surprise there. There was only a messy bed and a lying woman trying to deceive me. "Where is he?" I asked, with a low, dangerous voice. "Where is he?" "Who?" She tried to feign innocence, but her hands were shaking. "You know very well who I'm talking about," I replied, taking a step toward her. That was when I started searching. I opened the closet, looked through the clothes. Nothing. I went to the bathroom, looked behind the shower curtain. Empty. I returned to the room, looked behind the window curtains. No one. Eleanor stood there, watching me with the face of someone who thought she had been saved, that I wouldn't find anything. But I knew every corner of that house, and there was a place she had forgotten. I crouched down, looked under the bed, and there he was. Byron, our neighbor, the polite young man I greeted every day. He was curled up under my bed, wearing only boxers, his eyes wide with fear, cold, sweating, looking at me with an expression of total terror. For a second, we just stared at each other. Him down there, me up here. And then I felt a wave of rage so big I thought I was going to explode. "Get out from under there," I told him, my voice trembling with rage. "Get out from under there now!" Byron stayed paralyzed for a few seconds, like a cornered rat, not knowing what to do. "I told you to get out from under there!" I screamed this time, and he started to crawl out from under the bed, face down, pathetic, cowardly, ridiculous. When he finally stood up, just indoors in front of me, he tried to speak. "Mr. Vance, can I explain?" "Explain what?" "That he was under my bed, in my house, after being with my wife by accident." I took a step toward him, and he backed up, pressing himself against the wall. I wanted to punch that face. I wanted to break every bone in that body. I wanted to make him feel a fraction of the pain I was feeling. My hands closed into fists. My muscles tensed. My whole body was ready to attack. But then I looked at him again. A man, under 40, a coward, hiding under the bed like a shameless dog, and I realized he wasn't worth it. He wasn't worth my rage, wasn't worth my time, wasn't worth anything. "Take your clothes and get out of my house," I told him in a low but firm voice. Byron ran to the chair where he had left his pants and shirt. He got dressed in a huge hurry, tripping over his own legs, he was so nervous. Eleanor remained standing in the middle of the room, mute, white as paper, just watching me. "Mr. Vance, sorry, Byron tried to speak again, while putting on his shirt. "Shut up and get out of here before I change my mind," I said, pointing to the door. He ran out, going down the stairs, stumbling, and I heard the front door slam shut. I was left there alone with Eleanor. The silence was so heavy, it seemed the air had become dense. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. "Don't," I said. "Don't say anything now. Don't try to explain. Don't invent excuses." She closed her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of someone who got caught, someone who knew she had lost everything. I looked around the room, our room, the place where we had shared so many moments, where our children had been conceived, where we had talked about dreams, plans, the future. And now everything was stained, everything dirty, everything destroyed. I would never be able to enter that room again without seeing that image. Byron under the bed, Eleanor in a robe, the sheets on the floor, betrayal stamped on every detail. "How long?" I asked, without being able to look at her, still viewing the room. Eleanor remained silent. "I asked you how long," I shouted, turning toward her. She jumped from the fright and started crying harder. 2 years, she whispered between sobs. 2 years, Marcus. It started 2 years ago. 2 years, 730 days. While I worked, while I struggled to give her comfort, while I believed we still had a marriage. She was with him, with our neighbor, a boy who could be her son. "Why?" I asked. And this time my voice came out weak, broken. "Why, Eleanor? What did I do so wrong?" She wiped her face with her hands, took a deep breath, and looked me in the eyes. "You didn't do anything wrong, Marcus. The problem is you didn't do anything. You were always working, always tired, always busy. We didn't talk anymore, didn't go out anymore. We didn't have anything anymore. I felt alone. And Byron? He gave me attention. He made me feel alive again, made me feel like a woman. Those words hit me like punches to the stomach. I didn't make her feel like a woman. Me, who had worked like a condemned man all my life to give her a good house, food on the table, comfort, security. Me, who had been faithful all those years, who had never looked at another woman, who had honored every promise I made on our wedding day. And she needed to feel like a woman in the arms of a boy who had no responsibility whatsoever, who lived off computer work without knowing what it was to sweat to earn bread. "You are pathetic," I told her, and I saw her shrink at the word. "You traded 35 years of the marriage, a family, everything we built together for a cheap fling with a neighbor. And you know the worst part? You did it in our bed, in our house, in the place that was ours." She kept crying, but said nothing. There was nothing to say either. I turned my back on her and went down the stairs. I went to the living room, took my cell phone, and called Ray, our son. When he answered, I tried to keep my voice steady. "Son, you need to come home now, it's urgent." He realized by my tone that it was serious and said he was leaving Atlanta immediately. I hung up and sat there in the armchair with my head in my hands, trying to process everything that had happened. Eleanor came down after a while, already dressed, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She tried to sit next to me, but I moved away. "Don't touch me," I warned her. She stood in the middle of the living room, looking lost, not knowing what to do. "Marcus, we can talk about this. We can try to resolve it." Resolve. I laughed, but it was a bitter laugh without any humor. "You think there is something to resolve? You betrayed me for 2 years. 2 years. You slept with another man in our bed. You lied to my face every day. You pretended everything was fine while you stabbed me in the back. And now you want to resolve it?" I shook my head. "There is nothing left to resolve, Eleanor. It's over. We are over." She started crying again, but this time with desperation. "Please, Marcus. Please don't do this. I made a mistake, I know, but we can get over it. We can go to therapy. We can start over." I interrupted her. "Start over? How? Every time I look at you, I'm going to remember that scene. Every time we pass Byron's house, I'm going to remember that you were with him. There is no way to erase this, Eleanor. There isn't." The rest of the day was like being in a fog. Ray arrived from Atlanta in the late afternoon, and when I told him what had happened, I saw my son cry for the first time since he was a child. He hugged in his mother because, deep down, he still loved her, but he looked at me with a deep sadness and said, "Dad, I understand if you want a divorce. No one deserves to go through this." We also notified Judy. She came over to our house with the grandkids, and when she learned the truth, she could barely look at her mother. That night, I sent Eleanor to sleep in the guest room. I was never going to share a bed with her again. I stayed awake all night, lying alone in that room that now seemed like a tomb, thinking about how my life had turned upside down in a matter of hours, thinking about how 35 years could be destroyed so easily, thinking about how I had been so blind, so naive, so foolish. On Monday morning, the first thing I did was call a lawyer. A coworker recommended a good term specialized in divorces. I made an appointment for the same day, and there, around 10 in the morning, I was sitting in a room with freezing air conditioning, telling the whole story to a man in a gray suit who listened to everything while writing on a yellow pad. When I finished telling it, he took off his glasses, rubbed his eyes, and said, "Mr. Vance, you have every ground to ask for a divorce on the basis of adultery. The house is in whose name? I replied that it was in my name. Perfect. We are going to guarantee that you keep everything that is rightfully yours. I returned home with a folder full of papers to sign, documents to get, copies to make. Eleanor was sitting in the kitchen when I arrived, with a cup of cold coffee in front of her, her face swollen from so much crying. When she saw me, she tried to speak, but I walked straight past. I went up to the bedroom and started separating my things from hers. I took my clothes out of the closet, my underwear, my socks, my shoes. I took my personal documents, my cherished objects, the watch my father gave me before dying. I put everything in suitcases and went down. "What are you doing?" Eleanor asked, getting up from the chair when she saw me coming down with the suitcases. "I'm leaving," I replied without looking at her. "I'm going to stay a few days at Judy's house until I find a place to live. You can stay here until the divorce goes through, but after that, you're going to have to look for another place. The house is mine." She opened her mouth to protest, but I continued. "And another thing, Eleanor, don't try to contact me. Everything you need to say, you say it to my lawyer. The number is here." I threw a card on the table and continued toward the door. "Marcus, wait!" she shouted, coming after me. "Can't we at least try to understand what happened?" I stopped at the door, turned toward her, and looked her in the eyes. Those eyes that one day seemed beautiful to me, those eyes that now only caused me disgust. "What happened is that you betrayed me for 2 years with a man who lives 30 feet from our house. What happened is that you destroyed 35 years of marriage, an entire family, because you wanted to feel like a woman. What happened, Eleanor, is that you chose him instead of me. So, no, we don't have anything left to talk about." I walked out and slammed the door. I put the suitcases in the car and went straight to Judy's house here in Chicago. Since Ray had to go back to Atlanta, Judy had offered her spare room. During the drive, I cried. I cried like a condemned man, tears rolling down my face, blurring my vision, having to pull over on the shoulder twice because I couldn't see the road well. I cried for the life I had lost, for the marriage that had ended, for the trust that had been broken. I cried because I felt old, tired, and used. I cried because I didn't know how I was going to rebuild my life. When I got there, Judy received me with a tight hug. She had prepared the guest room for me, put clean sheets on the bed, clean towels in the bathroom. Her husband tried to cheer me up, made a special meal, but I could barely eat. The food wouldn't go down. It got stuck in my throat. Everything tasted like ash, like emptiness. After eating, I went to the room, lay on the bed, and stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep, unable to think straight, just feeling that huge pain in my chest that wouldn't pass. The days that followed were the worst of my life. I woke up in the morning with no desire to get up, no desire to do anything. Judy tried to cheer me up, took me for walks in the park, kept me company, talked with me, but nothing helped. I was broken inside. My cell phone wouldn't stop ringing. It was Eleanor calling 10, 20 times a day, sending messages saying she loved me, that it had been a mistake, that she wanted to ask for forgiveness. I blocked her number. I didn't want to hear, didn't want to know. Ray also called every day, worried about me. He had spoken with his mother, heard her version of the story. but made it clear he was on my side. Dad, what Mom did is unforgivable. It has no justification. I understand she felt lonely, but that doesn't give her the right to betray you that way. Those words gave me a little comfort. At least my children knew who the victim was and who the guilty one was in this story. After about 2 weeks living at Judy's, I started looking for an apartment to rent. I didn't want to stay dependent on my daughter being a burden in her life. I found a small apartment, 1 bedroom and a living room, in a quiet neighborhood in Chicago. It was simple, furnished with the basics. It had nothing special, but it was mine. I signed the lease, paid the rent and the deposit, and moved in. I brought my suitcases, my few things, and set up my new life there in that tiny space that didn't look like a home. It looked like a cell. The divorce process was moving forward. My lawyer had filed the papers, and Eleanor had been served. She tried to dispute some things, tried to ask for alimony, tried to keep half of everything, but my lawyer was firm. She committed adultery, Mr. Vance. The law is on your side. In the end, it was decided that the house would stay with me, as well as most of the assets. Eleanor would have to leave and fend for herself. It was the minimum amount of justice I could have after everything she had done. But the worst part of it all wasn't the division of assets, wasn't the paperwork, wasn't the legal procedures. The worst was the silence, the deafening silence of that empty apartment. I woke up in the morning and had no one to say good morning to. I made coffee alone, drank it alone, washed the cup alone, ate lunch alone, ate dinner alone, slept alone. The loneliness was so great it seemed like it was going to swallow me. And the worst part is that it wasn't just any loneliness. It was the loneliness of someone who had lost 35 years of life all at once. There was one night I was lying on the sofa watching some nonsense on television, trying to forget about everything, when the doorbell rang. I went to answer it, and when I opened the door, I almost fell backward. It was Eleanor. She was thinner, her hair messy, her eyes red and swollen. "Marcus, please, I need to talk to you," she said with a tearful voice. "I have nothing to talk to you about," I replied, starting to close the door. But she put her hand up to stop it. "Please, just 5 minutes. I beg you." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on the edge of the pool, hands shaking in her lap. I remained standing, arms crossed, waiting. "I broke up with Byron," she said, looking at the floor. "I ended it the same day. I never spoke to him again. He moved out of the neighborhood, sold the house, and left. And I am alone, Marcus. Completely alone. I lost you. I lost the trust of our children. I lost everything. And I deserved it. I know I deserved it. But I wanted to tell you that I repent. I regret it so much that I can't even sleep at night." I heard all of that without showing any emotion. When she finished, I took a deep breath and told her, "Do you think I care if you are regretful? Do you think that changes anything? Eleanor, you betrayed me for 2 years. 2 years? Every day you looked me in the face and lied. You kissed me knowing you had kissed him. You slept by my side knowing you had been with him, and now you come crying. Regret to me?" I shook my head. "Go, Eleanor. Go, and don't come back." She got up crying and walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned to me and said, "I loved you, Marcus. Truly, I know you don't believe me, but I loved you." I looked at her and replied, "If that was love to you, then I never want to feel your hate. She left, and I closed the door behind her. I leaned against the door, slid down to the floor, and cried once more, because even after everything, a part of me still hurt for her. The months went by slowly. Each day seemed like an eternity. The divorce finally went through, and with it came a strange sensation. Half relief, half emptiness. I was officially separated. After 35 years, free, but at the same time, lost. The house in the old neighborhood was sold. I didn't want to go back there anymore. I didn't want to see those walls that held so many memories, good and bad. I took my share of the money and invested it in something safe. At least I wasn't going to face financial difficulties. I kept living in that small apartment. Over time, I got used to the loneliness. I learned to cook for myself, something I had never done well. I made rice, beans, fried a steak, nothing elaborate, but enough to survive. On Sundays, I went to eat at Judy's house, or she came to pick me up to spend the day with her and the grandkids. The kids made me laugh, made me forget the pain a little, but when I returned to the empty apartment at the end of the day, it all came back. The sadness, the loneliness, the feeling that my life had ended. There were nights I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, looking at the dark ceiling, reliving everything in my head, the scene of the locked door, the moans, Byron under the bed, Eleanor's look of desperation when she was caught. Those images haunted me like ghosts. I tried to push them away. I thought about other things, but they always came back, mainly in the early morning, when the silence of the apartment was so absolute I could hear my own heart beating. The worst was when I saw elderly couples on the street, walking, holding hands, talking quietly, laughing together. That should be Eleanor. And me, that was what I had planned for our old age. And now, I was alone, living in a rented apartment, eating reheated food, sleeping in a cold bed. The bitterness was sometimes so great, I felt a bad taste in my mouth, a tightness in my chest that wouldn't go away even with medicine. There were days I stayed thinking about Byron. I wondered if he was okay, if he had found another woman to destroy her life, if he felt any remorse for what he had done. But then I pushed those thoughts away. He didn't even deserve my hate. He was a coward, a man without character who hid under the bed like a rat when discovered. A shameless boy who had no respect for anything, not for a family, not for 35 years of history. Thinking about him only did me harm, only fed the rage I was trying to overcome. The person who really occupied my thoughts was Eleanor. Even after everything, even knowing what she had done, I still thought about her. I thought about the good years we had, the laughter, the happy moments. I thought about the time when we were young and in love, when everything seemed possible, when the future was just promises. And that left me even more confused, even more lost. How could a person I loved so much, with whom I built a whole life, betray me that way? How could she throw everything in the trash for a cheap fling? I started frequenting the little park near the apartment early in the mornings. I got up with the sun, put on a sweater, and went out to walk. The fresh air, the birds singing, the movement of people going to work. All of that helped me clear my mind. I sat on a bench, drank coffee from a thermos I brought, and stayed there observing life pass by. There was a gentleman who was always there with an old dog. We exchanged good mornings every now and then. There was a lady who sold homemade bread at a stand. Little by little, those people became acquaintances, familiar faces in that new routine I was building. One day, I was at the grocery store buying a few things when I bumped into a lady. Her basket fell to the floor. Oranges rolled everywhere. A box of pasta fell. A jar of tomato sauce almost broke. I got all nervous, apologizing, bending down to pick things up, feeling like a clumsy old man. She smiled, said there was no problem, that these things happen, and bent down to help me too. She had a nice, sincere smile and clear eyes that seemed gentle. We chatted a little right there in the middle of the pasta aisle while we put things back in the basket. Her name was Martha. She was a widow. She had lost her husband to cancer about 3 years ago. She lived alone in an apartment nearby. She had 2 children who lived in other cities. She came to shop at that grocery store every week. We talked about the price of things, about how difficult life was for retirees, about the weather, a simple small talk. But it did me good. It had been a while since I talked naturally like that, without weight, without pain. We ended up leaving the grocery store together, each with our bags, chatting along the way. I discovered she lived just 3 blocks from me. When we arrived at her building, we said goodbye, and she said, "It was a pleasure meeting you, Marcus. Let's see if we run into each other around here again." I told her, yes, that would be nice, and went on my way. But that meeting stuck in my head. There was something about her, a tranquility and a peace that caught my attention. In the following days, I started running into Martha more frequently, sometimes at the grocery store, sometimes at the corner bakery, where I bought fresh bread in the mornings, sometimes at the little park, where I went to walk. She also went walking in the mornings. She carried a water bottle, did a few laps. We started walking together, talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her husband's children, about how difficult it had been to rebuild life alone. And I started opening up too, little by little, telling a bit of my story. She was a simple woman, calm, soft-spoken. She didn't have that agitation Eleanor had in the last few years. She was calm, serene, seemed to be at peace with life, even having lost her husband in such a painful way. I admired that about her from the beginning. I admired the strength she had, the capacity to move forward, to find joy in small things. She commented on a pretty flower she saw on the path, on a little bird that had made a nest in the tree near her building, on the taste of the coffee she had drunk in the morning. And that made me realize how much I had stopped paying attention to those things. After a few weeks of meeting by chance, I gathered the courage and invited her for a real coffee. We went to a coffee shop downtown, a cozy place with wooden tables and the smell of fresh pastries. We sat at a small table near the window, ordered coffee and a slice of cake, and talked for hours. Time flew by. I told her my complete story without hiding anything. I talked about the betrayal, the locked door, Byron under the bed, the divorce, the pain I still felt. I talked about the sleepless nights, about the loneliness that drowned me, about the fear of never being able to trust anyone again. She listened to everything with attention, without interrupting me, without judging me, without making mean comments about Eleanor. She just listened. And when I finished speaking, she reached her hand across the table and took mine. Her hand was warm, soft. And that simple gesture comforted me more than any word could. "I understand your pain, Marcus," she said with a quiet voice. "When I lost my husband, I thought I was never going to be able to move on. I thought life was over for me too, but life goes on, and one has to go on along with it, not to forget what happened, but to honor the time we still have." Those words stayed resonating in my head for days. Life goes on. Would I be ready to go on? Could I open my heart again after having been so hurt? I didn't know. But for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope, a small desire, still shy but real, to try again, to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still space for happiness in my life. Martha and I started seeing each other more frequently. We went to the movies to see those old films we liked. We walked in Grant Park on Sunday mornings. We had dinner together at simple restaurants. It wasn't anything romantic at first, just company. Two lonely people who found comfort in one another. But little by little, without realizing it, I started opening up more, smiling more, living more. She introduced me to her children. On a video call, they lived far away, one in Houston, the other in Denver. But they were attentive. They called their mom every week, and Martha met my kids too. Ray and Judy liked her immediately. They saw she was a good person who did me good. "Dad, we just want to see you happy again," Ray told me after meeting her. "And if Martha makes you happy, then we support you." But not everything was easy. There were difficult moments when my past returned to haunt me. Once, Martha took a long time to reply to a message of mine, and I immediately started to get suspicious. Was she with another man? Was she deceiving me? Paranoia took over me. And when she finally answered, explaining her phone battery had died, I was already upset. She realized, called me to talk, and I broke down. I told her about the fear I felt, about the wounds that still hadn't healed, about the difficulty of trusting. She didn't get angry, didn't judge me, just hugged me and said, "Marcus, I understand, and I am going to show you every day that you can trust me, not with words, but with actions, with presence, with honesty." And that was exactly what she did. Every day, every gesture, every word showed me she was different, that she wasn't going to betray me, wasn't going to abandon me, wasn't going to hurt me. I started realizing I liked being with her. I liked her calm way of being, the patience she had with me, the respect she showed for my pain. She never pressured anything, never demanded anything, never asked if I still loved Eleanor, never forced me to forget the past. She was just there, present, firm, like an anchor holding me when the waves tried to drag me back to the sea of sadness. One day, she invited me to dinner at her apartment. She made a delicious pasta with red sauce and fresh basil that she cultivated herself in a small garden on the balcony. We ate, talked, laughed. She told me funny stories about the grandkids who visited her on vacations. And I told her about the time when Ray and I went fishing at the river and never caught anything, but pretended it had been a big catch. And when the night was ending, when I was getting ready to leave, she looked me in the eyes and said, "Marcus, I know you are still hurt. I know the wound of betrayal is still open, still hurts, still bleeds sometimes, but I want you to know that I am not her. I am not going to hurt you. I am not going to betray you. I am not going to lie to you. If you want to try something with me, it will be with total honesty and mutual respect. But if you don't want to, if you aren't ready yet, that's okay too. I will keep being your friend. I will keep being here without pressure, without demands." I stayed in silence for a while, processing those words. I looked at that woman who had appeared in my life in such an unexpected, simple way. And then for the first time, since I discovered Eleanor's betrayal, I felt my heart beat differently. It wasn't wild passion. It wasn't that fire of youth I had felt when I met Eleanor. It was something calmer, more mature, deeper. It was the possibility of starting over, of having a true partner, someone who would be with me, not out of obligation, not out of convenience, but out of genuine decision. "I want to try," I replied, and I saw her eyes shine. "But you're going to have patience with me, Martha. A lot of patience. You're going to have to understand that sometimes I'm going to be afraid. I'm going to be suspicious without reason. I'm going to protect myself too much." The betrayal left me with deep marks, scars that will take time to heal completely. She smiled, that gentle smile that had already become so familiar, took my hand and said, "I have all the patience in the world, Marcus, and we are going to walk together in this process at your pace, without hurry." And so began a new stage of my life. It wasn't easy. It wasn't without stumbles. There were moments when my heart still ached, remembering Eleanor, remembering those 35 years that had gone down the drain, remembering what she had done. There were moments when I looked at Martha and was afraid to give myself again, to allow myself to be vulnerable, to trust fully. But she was patient, as promised. She went on earning my trust, little by little, brick by brick, with simple but consistent gestures, with true words, with constant presence. She taught me things I had never learned. She taught me to cook for real, not just rice and beans, but tasty dishes, different spices. She taught me to take care of plants, and together we set up a little garden on the balcony of my apartment. She taught me to view life with more lightness, not to take everything so seriously, to enjoy the small moments. And I, little by little, started learning to trust again, to love again in a different way, more mature, more conscious, more genuine. Eleanor still tried to contact me a few times throughout that time. She sent messages on the grandkids' birthdays, at Christmas, at New Year's, always trying to start some conversation, always apologizing, always saying she regretted it. But I never replied. Not out of anger, not anymore. The anger had passed. It had transformed into indifference, simply because there was nothing left to talk about. That chapter of my life had closed definitely, and I was writing a new one. A chapter where I was respected, where I was valued, where I didn't need to go around suspecting anything, where I could be happy again, even if it was in a different way than I had planned. Today, when I look back and see everything I went through, I stand thinking about how unpredictable life is. I thought I knew how my old age was going to be. I thought I was going to grow old next to Eleanor, that we were going to be that elderly couple holding hands that I saw so much on the street. I thought we were going to watch the grandkids grow together, that we were going to travel to see new places, that we were going to enjoy retirement in peace. But life had other plans for me, plans that included pain, betrayal, a new beginning. It's been almost 2 years since that Friday. I came home early and heard the moans coming from my bedroom. Since I kicked down that door and saw my life crumble in a matter of seconds. 2 years since I found Byron under my bed, cowardly, pathetic. 2 years since I discovered that 35 years of marriage could be destroyed by a cheap fling, for moans she had never given me, for a man who could be her son. Time passed, and with it came the changes. Martha and I are together, are living in an apartment that is ours, that has the personality of both of us. It isn't big, it isn't luxurious, but it is full of peace. She planted flowers on the balcony, and every morning I wake up with the smell of fresh basil she grows. We drink coffee together, talk about the plans for the day, we laugh. They are simple things, but they are worth more than any luxury. I learned with her what a real relationship is. A relationship based on respect, on honesty, on presence. Martha doesn't lock doors, doesn't hide her phone, doesn't invent weird excuses when she comes home. She is transparent. She is true. She is what she shows herself to be. And that, my friend, is priceless. After having lived years in a lie without knowing it, now I live in a truth that makes me breathe better. My children are fine. Ray continues in Atlanta working, taking care of his family. Judy is still in Chicago. We talk more frequently now. She calls me every week, comes to visit me with the grandkids every now and then. The children adore Martha. They call her Grandma Martha, and that warms my heart. Seeing that my grandkids have a good figure in their life, someone who treats their grandfather with affection, with respect, is a blessing. Eleanor, well, I heard through Judy that she is still living in Chicago, rented a small apartment. She lives alone. Byron really left the city. No one knows where to. All the neighbors found out about the scandal, and Eleanor became the subject of conversation. I don't wish her ill, not anymore. But I don't feel pity, either. She made her decisions, and now she is reaping the consequences. That's life. The hardest part of all this wasn't the separation itself, wasn't the divorce process, wasn't even the pain of betrayal. The hardest thing was rebuilding trust, rebuilding the capacity to believe in someone again. Martha helped me with that in a way I don't even know how to explain. She never demanded trust from me, never asked me to forget the past. She just showed me day after day that she was different, that she was trustworthy. And little by little, very slowly, I started allowing myself to trust again. I still have nightmares every now and then. I dream that I am in front of that locked door again, hearing the moans, feeling that anguish in my chest. I wake up sweating, with my heart racing, but then I look to the side and see Martha sleeping peacefully, and that calms me. She is there, real, present, true. And I take a deep breath. I give thanks for having found her and go back to sleep. I learned many lessons from all this. I learned that a long marriage is no guarantee of fidelity. I learned that you never completely know someone, no matter how many years you are together. I learned that betrayal has no forgiveness, no matter how many justifications the person invents. I learned that loneliness can be a cruel teacher, but also an opportunity for a new beginning. I learned that true love isn't like in the soap operas, full of passion and drama. True love is respect, it is presence, it is truth. I learned also that it's no use living with rage. Rage consumes, corrodes from the inside, doesn't let one move forward. For a long time, I felt rage toward Eleanor, toward Byron, toward myself for having been so blind. But the rage didn't change anything. It didn't bring the 35 years back, didn't undo the betrayal, didn't cure the wound. What cured me was time, was Martha's patience, was the decision to start over, to try again. If I could go back in time, I would do it differently. Maybe I would have paid more attention to the signs, would have talked more with Eleanor, would have noticed she was drifting away. But I also think that maybe not. Maybe everything happened exactly as it had to happen. for me to get where I am today. Beside a woman who respects me, who values me, who loves me as I am, with all my wounds and scars. Life after 65 can be a new beginning, can be a new opportunity, can be a chance to be happy in a way one never was before. It is not the end when a marriage ends, even if it lasted decades. It is not the end when one discovers they were betrayed by the one they loved most. It is painful. It is devastating. But it is not the end. It is just the end of a chapter. And one can write new chapters, better ones, truer ones. Today, I am a different man from the one who entered the house that Friday. I am more cautious, more suspicious, but I am also more conscious of when someone is true, when someone deserves my trust. And I found that in Martha. I found someone who doesn't see me as an old fool who can be deceived, but as a companion, as a partner in life. Sometimes we run into Eleanor on the street when I go to visit Judy. We greet each other from afar. A nod of the head. Just that. There is no resentment in my heart. Not anymore. There is only the awareness that we made different decisions. She chose betrayal, and I chose dignity. She chose lies, and I chose truth. I'm really glad you're here, and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.